One of the key functions of the urinary system is the elimination of waste products. Waste can be anything that have been generated by a reaction or a process in the body that isn't really needed by the body, and the body needs to get rid of it before it builds up to high levels. This can include toxic byproducts, things that if they built up to too high levels would be toxic to cells, drugs, things that come in the food we eat that get into our bodies. So it really is a powerful system in getting rid of a lot of waste. It's also very important in homeostasis for a lot of the systems in the body. For example, water balance. So how much water you lose or retain is controlled by the urinary system. This is also related to how many electrolytes, sodium, potassium, calcium, are retained in the body or eliminated. Both of those, the balance of water and the balance of electrolytes, are key in making sure the blood is the right pH, that it doesn't get too acidic or too basic, because there really isn't a very big window there in which life can be maintained. How much water is maintained is also really important in blood pressure. Obviously, if you retain too much water and a portion of it is in the capillaries and in the arteries and veins, that's going to increase the blood pressure. The kidney also makes the erythropoietin that we talked about as being important in red blood cell production. And one of the key steps in activating vitamin D so that your calcium balance can be maintained happens in the kidney. The main organs of the urinary system. You have a pair of kidneys, which are in the posterior portion of the abdominal cavity. Each of those is a unit which is processing urine, and from each of those, a tube goes taking the urine down from the kidneys. These tubes are called the ureters, down to the bladder. The urinary bladder is fed by a ureter from each kidney. The bladder is really a storage place for urine, and then from the bladder, urine can be emptied out of the body through the urethra. Let's look a little closer at the kidney. The kidney has three key regions. The very outer portion of the kidney is called the renal cortex. And then there is a layer of the kidney called the renal medulla. The cortex and the medulla have different functions, and we'll talk about those relative to urine production. And then the deepest part of the kidney is the renal pelvis. The renal pelvis is really the collecting tubes of all the urine generated in the medulla of the kidney, and it drains from the renal pelvis into the ureters down to the bladder. The actual functional unit of processing urine in the kidney is called a nephron. And the nephron really has two key parts. There is a glomerulus and renal tubules. The glomerulus, you can see here, is fed by arteries. So in the kidney, the blood flow comes up these arteries and flows into the glomerulus. It is in this glomerulus that fluid gets out of the glomerulus into the renal tubules to be processed. A closer view of the glomerulus shows here is, it's really a specialized capillary bed. So you know that capillary beds are the places where things are actually exchanged in and out of the blood system. The rest of the arteries and the veins are just tubes getting things from one place to another. In the capillary beds is where exchange actually happens. This is a very special capillary bed because it's more permeable than other capillary beds in the body. What that means is, by the process of filtration or just pressure of blood flow, can actually push anything small, smaller than the size of a cell, for example, can really leave the blood system, the arteries there, and go out into this capsule around that capillary. There is another, that blood continues to flow out another arteriole. So the one that's going into the capillary bed is a lot bigger. So the afferent arteriole is a lot bigger. And the one coming out is smaller and narrow. So that generates pressure whenever you have a big hose coming into something and a smaller hose coming out. That actually generates the pressure that pushes all the small things and fluid, some of it at least, out of the glomerulus. So the things that have left the blood there, all the small stuff, some water, is in this glomerular capsule, a little capsule around those blood vessels, and it can flow from there into a tube called the proximal convoluted tubule. That tube eventually, all of this is happening in the cortex, the outer layer of the kidney. Eventually that tube can actually dip down into the medulla of the kidney. All along this tube, exchange of things that need to be waste that needs to leave the body, or things that got out of the glomerulus that need to be kept by the body, is happening. So here are the three main stages of urine formation. You initially have filtration that happens at the glomerulus, where water and small solutes, small things, smaller than, a protein size small thing, are forced through the capillary walls, and they're collected in the glomerular capsule. They then go down into the tube that is the proximal convoluted tubule, and as it goes along that tube, the tube has capillaries all around it, and two processes are really happening at the same time. One is reabsorption. So if you have things that were small and got out of the capillaries of the glomerulus, but your body really needs them, say glucose, for example, there are receptors there that are helping pull all of those things back out of those tubes, so you just don't pee them all out. Also, you can have some secretion. If there were larger proteins that couldn't get out by filtration, but they need to be eliminated from the body, those can actually be secreted from the bloodstream into those tubes. So ideally, when you get to the end of these tubes, after the filtration, reabsorption, secretion has happened, hopefully at the end of these tubes, you now have gotten rid of all the waste that you need to get rid of and reabsorbed any of the things that your body actually needed. So here's another way of looking at it. All the small stuff and some fluid got into this tubule. Things that are reabsorbed, glucose, amino acids, water, poisons and toxins that are larger could be secreted into the tubule. The tubule, when it dips down into the medulla, a lot of water and some of the electrolytes are reabsorbed from the tubule. So hopefully when you get to this collecting duct, it's a big tube, that now what's in that collecting duct should be pretty much urine, things that you're wanting to eliminate from the body.